And we're live.
And we're back.
All right. Hello, everyone out there. Good afternoon. I'm Justin.
I am Kevin.
You are listening to the Sonic Alchemy podcast. We are shooting our second episode today. First time we've done that. So hopefully we have the energy to make it through, but I'm charged up.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this too. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So today we are doing our first ever sort of show and tell episode that Kev has come up with an awesome name. This is the Vinyl Countdown.
The Vinyl Countdown.
Obligatory.
Yeah. Don't sue us, Europe.
Yeah, we're so sorry.
Yeah.
The idea here is to showcase some of our favorite albums that might have stories for us, or we just think are great recommendations. That if you haven't heard them, you probably should. We both have made a selection, but I think what's probably worth getting into before we share about the music, not everyone is into vinyl. Not everyone has the vinyl bug. Mm-hmm. People consume music in all kinds of different ways. So
as do we.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So vinyl happens to be something that we're into, and we both got there from different places. So I think it's interesting to talk about that. And, I also would just say right off the bat, I encourage people to check out different formats because, there is something different to each experience, and one is not better than another, although people like to claim that. And it depends on how you measure that. It's all subjective. It's all art. But I think there are some unique things that owning a vinyl record give you that happen to really inspire us. And so I guess I'd start off with the question, which is, how the hell did you get into vinyl, and why have you stuck with it, or what is it that kind of keeps you in that format? Yeah,
I could certainly tell you, that could be 20 or 30 podcasts worth of stuff, but I think just to keep it simple, I grew up with it. It was a format. I am a bit older, long in the tooth. So it was the format to listen to when I was growing up and when I was a kid. Yeah. So for me, vinyl was really it. And music consumption, Mom had a record player. And when I became interested in wanting to kind of hear music that just wasn't on the radio station, right? We'd hear that in the car or whatever. And I would go home and I'm like, oh, what's this? This is interesting. I want to know what this thing does. And sort of, looking through her record collection. She didn't have a big record collection, but she was very particular about the records that she had, So listening to music that way was really all I knew. And of course, as you go and as formats change, cassette to CD to streaming, iPod onto now, streaming platforms and all that kind of stuff. I think as my liking of music and how I consume it changed and evolved, there was something that was just very enigmatic, I guess, about vinyl. It was this thing that when you pick it up and you get to open it up, or you take the sleeve out, or you look at the liner notes and all that, it's an experience. And regardless of how people feel about the output, like how it sounds versus this or that, that's a whole thing. Right. And I don't want to argue that for anybody. Like, there was a point in my life where I was like, it's the only way, it's the purest, and I get that. And trust me, it is a great thing, but it also is a very costly and
little fire and brimstone.
Yeah. You can break the bank making your system sound, incredible. And for most people, and maybe for the average listener that listens to music now, it won't sound any different. But to me, what's kept me into vinyl for all this time in my various periods was the literal tactile excitement of picking that record up and seeing it in sort of the vision of what you imagine the artist who made it wanted you to experience. I think that's part of the resurgence of it now. A lot of bands that we love that are maybe of the last 20 years or so, vinyl wasn't necessary. It wasn't a necessary medium, but they chose it to be again. And they said, no, we grew up with this, or our parents passed down vinyl to us. So it became sort of this thing that over the past, I would say, and it could be longer, 30 years, has steadily come back to being something that's very exciting again. And people are building their vinyl collections. They're going back and finding old artists that they love, that they want to get that copy of, or even new artists now that are releasing their music are doing special, very special curated vinyl of their album. Whatever, is coming out in streaming, you can listen to it that way, or you can buy this incredible thing that's got all this special stuff to it, liner notes, artwork, all this great stuff. So that's always what brought me back to it. I think even more than the fidelity of it was really just that. It's a really cool way to experience the music and the art that was made by that artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, I didn't grow up with vinyl. My earlier memories other than radio are cassette tapes. So we had those, and I remember having different ones on hot days melt on me. So you'd be listening to it and it would just start warping and sound all crazy. So definitely downsides with analog formats, even though they can be really cool. But
there's a funny story I have to tell you. This is really good, and I'm sure you all appreciate this. A very close friend of mine at the time, his name's Bill. He had a Yugo. If you ever remember these cars, like a 3-cylinder car, it's like what the smart car would be now, or whatever those little tinier cars were. And the tape deck in that thing was terrible. It was always just eating tapes. And I think we were listening.
I forgot about tapes getting eaten.
So
that's hilarious.
I'll never forget. We were in the McDonald's drive-thru, and I think we were listening to like Shout at the Devil by Motley Crue.
Yeah.
And it started to, start to do its thing. And he got so mad that he took his foot and put it through the entire console where his tape was. He was so angry.
No way, really?
I swear it was like a Flintstone mobile. Like, his whole foot.
I've never heard of anyone doing that.
It was stuck in there because he got so angry. He kicked it, and it just, it was so frustrating, but so liberating.
Welcome to driving with your left foot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, that story about tapes just reminded me of that. Sorry.
No, that's hilarious. Yeah. So I remember that. And then when I'm probably like 12, 13, CDs came out earlier than that. I feel like roughly that's around when my family kind of made the conversion. We weren't super cutting edge. We weren't way behind either, but it was probably out a couple years before we really dove over there. So CDs are really what I came up with. And that was, honestly, CDs are still great. I don't have anything that can play a CD now is kind of my issue. So when it came to choosing a physical format, for whatever reason, just growing up, I don't know why I had a fascination with it. I remember Steve Vai told the story a lot of times about when he was a kid, just looking at sheet music, like the way that the notes were arranged was just innately beautiful to him. And that's part of what got him into wanting to learn how to read and write music, is because it looked like a beautiful art form in and of itself, which I think is a really cool sentiment. Yeah. And it's sort of like that for me with vinyl. I would see pictures or whatever, or see people who happen to have a collection. There was just some allure to it that had nothing to do with whether it sounded better or not. It just felt to me like that was kind of right for some reason. But just like you, I've been through all the different formats and used streaming and all these other different things. But yeah, when I finally got a record player, thanks to you. Kev was nice enough when he upgraded to give me his previous record player. And I didn't even get to use it for a while because I didn't have the rest of the components that I needed to set it up. But that was really exciting to me because it sort of allowed me an entry point into a world that I had always wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
And then once I did, start listening to it and got a decent system and everything, I realized the other qualities of it that I really enjoy. But, what I find is that if I'm really trying to enjoy music, I need a physical format, because as great as my phone is, and I would never want my music to not be on my phone, it's different when the artwork is big and you got the lyrics and the only thing that damn disc does is play music.
Yeah.
With your phone, it's so easy to be distracted. Mm-hmm. You're listening on the go. You're already not paying attention. You're getting text messages or notifications or reminders of things. Like, it's so hard not to just fall into the muscle memory of perusing whatever, even if you're doing it mindlessly while you're listening. I can't focus the same way. I just can't.
It takes you out of the music.
Yeah, totally. And so if I'm wanting to truly enjoy it, I like having something that's dedicated just for that. And, the big artwork's a plus. The way it sounds is totally a plus. And some people scoff at the idea of vinyl sounding different or better. My experience is it does sound different. Whether it's better is totally subjective. But there's no doubt that it sounds different, even if it's a modern album pressed on it. And I have my own suspicions as to why. But just by nature of the format, even if it is placebo, my experience is still better. And so your mileage may vary, but that's kind of how we got into vinyl and why we like this format. But if your only option is to, listen on Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube, whatever, definitely go check these albums out. Oh, the final thing I'll say as a shameless plug for other artists, because we don't have vinyl for sale currently, although that will change. The other thing that now I really like about vinyl, since I have a steady job and,
you can afford it.
Yeah. Cause it is on some level, it's a luxury.
Yeah, absolutely.
But assuming that, you've got a little bit of money to spend, I recommend for bands that you love, especially, like if you really love an artist and you would love to see them continue making art, one of the best ways to do that is to go and ideally right from the artist, go to their website. But it's to buy a physical format from them, because whether that's a CD, whether that's whatever, bands are even reissuing tapes now, which is kind of cool. But the point is artists gain so much more from that than they do from streaming their album. So if you find yourself going back and back to an album that you love and you played it a lot this year or maybe ever, consider recognizing that they probably didn't really benefit all that much from those streams, and that they would benefit from you purchasing their album. So for what it's worth, support artists, especially if you are an artist. I had to have a conversation with myself back in the pirating days that as an artist, I no longer felt good about stealing other people's music.
Absolutely. That was a big one for me too. It was a reckoning where I had done that because I wanted to listen to it, but I couldn't afford it at that point in time in my life. And here's this, while it's good or bad, there was a platform for us to be able to do that. But I've since gone back and go, I really want to support these folks who I love and admire and have made great music. And so repurchasing their stuff in some form and supporting them, I think, is very, very important.
Well, and with how available music is now today, there's no need to steal anything. But honestly, streams are like a slightly better version of what stealing music used to be. And so, that's just to say, think about where it comes from. You don't get to sit and enjoy that album for hours and share it with your friends and make memories to it, have it be the soundtrack of a particular part of your life without an artist having invested a lot of their time, their energy, their love, their, exercising their demons in a lot of cases to create the art that you get to enjoy. So just keep that in perspective. Maybe that inspires you to go out and support your favorite artist. Well, all that said, let's get into the show and tell. I guess we can go back and forth, but Kev, why don't you kick us off? What's on top of your list? Why should we care about it?
Let's see. I had one up here that I'll start in just a minute, but I'm going to start with the one I think it's only fair in listening. I said that story before about getting introduced to vinyl. I'm perusing my mom's collection. Like most kids, they're going to be like, oh God, mom's music. I'm not into my parents' music or whatever. But again, as a kid, I'm like, well, maybe there's something that's really cool here. And I remember thumbing through these albums, and a lot of the artists I didn't know, or I had heard mom play, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't really like that. But I stumbled across this band called the Eagles, and what initially got me into that was the artwork on their albums. I remember, and I can't tell you which album it was. It wasn't Hotel California. It was probably a prior album to that. But on the back of it might have been Desperado, actually. I think on the back of that record, they're dressed up in like this Western gear, and there's all these like cow skulls and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, yeah. So first one I think I would bring up, and I don't have all their records yet, but I did go and buy Greatest Hits 1 and 2. And I still go back. I've fallen in and out of love with the Eagles for a long time, but I will tell you that I'm definitely in love with them and their writing. And the Greatest Hits, of course, is super great way to just, if you're familiar with the band, you want those songs that that a lot of people know. It's pretty awesome. But again, even on the front, like, just on this one, you're getting some pretty cool artwork in there. The original albums, of course, they have some really great stuff on them, but I haven't gone back and gotten those yet. But that was what I think my very first interest in vinyl started with them, and I put that record on, and I was like, oh wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
I remember like Witchy Woman or something like that, and I was like, this sounds evil, but I'm not sure if I should like it. And then I heard Hotel California
of course
later,
you should.
and I'm like, yes, okay, my mom does like some cool music. This is awesome.
Seven Bridges Road.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And then you get exactly. You get like all the great musicianship from this. We've gone back, and you and I have talked about this as well. Like, there's a certain thing about music made in this kind of time frame for us. It's very special.
Oh yeah.
It's like direct 100%. To the board. There's no frills. There's no computer. There's no, oh crap, we'll fix it in post kind of idea. It's like, no, these are guys in the room playing this music. At least that's how it comes across. And that is incredibly special. So it's sort of what you see or what you hear is what you're getting. And it really points to the incredible musicianship from all of the guys in that band. So that would be one. I'll go quickly to the next.
Yeah.
The first time I see this album, I'm like, what am I about to experience here? This is going to be a journey. I can feel it.
Who are these 9 foot tall, crazy rock gods? Yeah. So
this was me finally getting into, and I didn't buy this initially. I bought it later. In fairness, I probably heard it on someone else's system and saw the record and just go, these guys have makeup on. This album's called Kiss Destroyer. Like, what on earth is going on?
It already sounds badass.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you hear Detroit Rock City for the first time, and this whole sort of story. Well, the story of like him getting in the car, and it's a whole starting up of the car.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing, it's like a whole thing. And it's like, what is going on? This guy's getting in the car. He's
very immersive.
I'm like, oh wow, I'm way in this now.
Yeah.
And he's driving the car, and of course the song's about him trying to make the midnight show, and something happens, and he may die. And I'm like, whoa, this is like full reckless abandon, and these guys are all in makeup, and this is insanity.
So creative.
Very creative. So this is one that I would tell you, if anybody that loves rock and roll, this is one that I feel like if you're building a vinyl collection, you have to have. It's one that is like, on some level, Kiss resonates with everybody in that way to me. Yeah. Maybe not everyone loves Kiss or loves their entire career or discography of stuff. I don't. But I absolutely
quick to throw them under the bus.
Not quick to throw them under the bus. I have a lot of respect for all of them, in fact. But there are certain records I'm like, I didn't like that one, you know.
Well, I think
it's hard to beat. You come out the gate with this album, it's like, holy Christ. Yeah. Like, this is the greatest hits. You know, it's pretty much on their first, you know what I mean? Like, you come out with this record and you're like, wow, I can't really beat that.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is, in fairness, it's easy to make jokes about Kiss, I think, or any band that is, let's say, a classic rock band,
right?
That is so larger than life, and like so many people like, right? At this point, it's easy to sort of like roll your eyes and make a joke. But to be fair, these guys were complete pioneers of what they did.
Yeah,
and I think it can be a mistake, especially if you're younger. And you're like, I know about them. I've heard a couple songs. You kind of dismiss it as unimportant, or, well, you know, it's so far removed from what's going on now that you might be interested in.
Right.
But I really recommend people go back and explore the roots of, you know, like the bands who inspired the bands that you love now. You'd be surprised how cool that shit is. The other little thing I was going to say on the topic of greatest hits, this is something that I didn't realize until recently. Actually, I was talking to our friend Bolo about this. I used to think greatest hits albums were a total joke and waste of time.
Yeah.
When I was growing up.
Same.
I was like, why? I mean, other than, I know it's a great way for a band to make money. It didn't make sense. It's not new art. It's like, I like the experience of listening to a whole album, by the way. But it finally occurred to me, especially with the physical format, is that you can't just jump around and skip songs easily. There are naturally drawbacks, right? Admittedly, to the way the vinyl works. It's hard to cherry pick songs, repeat songs. And so if you're wanting to listen to a band that you love and you want to hear the hits, and you don't want to have to be swapping records every 3 minutes, or, you know, moving the needle around, whatever, it's nice to just be able to put on a greatest hits album, like while you're cooking or whatever, and you don't have to be as attentive. And so it finally clicked for me. I'm like, oh, there's a real utility in these albums. Like, I love my Police greatest hits for that reason.
Oh, that's another one that's really great. Yeah. And you get, I mean, the one thing I love being able to listen to a record front to back.
Yeah.
And you get to experience the artist. And
sorry for those. Got to adjust my mic. It's killing me.
And you get to hear everything as it was intended.
Right.
But then you're like, well, sometimes though, maybe songs don't resonate as well as another one does. So having that greatest hits, I came around to the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I do just want to hear these.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about that. And even the way it's curated on a greatest hits album is kind of important. It still kind of tells a story in an interesting way. It isn't just like, here's one song, here's another, you know. Yeah. It's kind of curated, to me at least. It feels that way. Last one, and then I'll pass over to you as well. My introduction into concept album. And I know people will initially go, oh, he's going to talk about The Wall. No. I do love Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But I actually believe that Dark Side of the Moon is the record. Like, for me, that's the pinnacle record for me of Pink Floyd. It was, you know, this is
pun intended. Pinnacle.
Yeah, the pinnacle. Yeah. I guess it would be fair to see that this record has gotten some life on it. But
that's how you know it's good.
That's how you know it's good. And then, you can kind of open up and see. This is also the kind of thing that we're talking about, like getting all the lyrics, you getting the liner notes and stuff that's in here. I think this one actually came with a poster. I don't have the poster in here anymore, but this is one that, again, as a teenager and being told, I heard this stuff on our classic rock radio station all the time, but it was out of context. You would only hear like a song, you know, you wouldn't hear the whole thing as it was intended. So I put this album on and listened to it in its entirety and was like, okay, now I kind of understand Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Because I think up until that point, you would only hear things that maybe were palatable for the radio. And it wasn't like, there's some deep cuts on these albums where you're going, oh, wow, okay, now I can see how that song might tie into something else.
Yeah, they're a good example of a band that I know people make this argument for everything, but I would put this in even another category of you just don't cherry pick these songs unless you already really know the catalog. You're doing yourself a disservice if you've never sat down and listened front to back, because I don't know. They're just written in a way that is the best way to get it. And so, give yourself 45 minutes or whatever and, sit down and check it out.
Yeah. And if you really want to get, and there's the other thing that comes with some of these things too, is that they all have sort of this interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? There's like a certain thing about them that, that have been passed along. Folklore, I guess, would be a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you sync this up at a certain point with, The Wizard of Oz, then you have the dark side of the rainbow where you can sync this record at the certain point, with Wizard of Oz, and you can watch it and basically with the sound down on the movie. And Dark Side of the Moon sort of scores that movie. Completely coincidental, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't believe the conspiracy.
The band discredited that theory, although admitted that that happens to be a cool coincidence.
It's a cool coincidence, and it's an interesting thing to do. So if you're interested in that, go look it up on the interweb somewhere. But this album, to me, this really got me into psychedelic rock. It got me into the idea of writing a whole album that sort of ties from one song to another. And there's plenty of concept albums that I love, like Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, which I didn't bring today, but again, a favorite of mine. There's plenty of other concept records out there as well. But this kind of got me into that for sure. What do you got? What's on your list here?
Well, in no particular order, I just stacked my stuff up. Should be a really interesting combination of things, I'm sure. But my tastes are all over the place. So this is City of Evil by Avenged Sevenfold. This band means so much to me and has for a really long time. So this came out in 2005. So it comes out in 2005. I used to play a lot of video games around that time. And so I remember hearing, it was Blinded in Chains or Backcountry in a video game that I was playing. Might have been Madden, ironically. It was some EA sports game. And I remember thinking it was really cool. And then, so in the middle of my sophomore year in high school, I get in trouble and get kicked out. And I move to a new school in a new town, in a really tiny town. And that's where I meet Michael. But before I ever meet him for the first time, it's like my first week in the school and there's an assembly. So I don't know what the hell's going on. I just got here.
Yeah.
So I show up at the assembly and there's a band playing. It was Michael's band at the time, and they're playing Backcountry in front of the whole school. And I was like, that gave me hope for the first time that week, because I didn't want to be in this new school in this new town. And
there are people here that I can relate to.
I was like, this is awesome. Like, how cool is it that the school's letting them do this?
Yeah.
And I knew the song, and that really got me into the band from that point on. So that was massively influential for me. It's one of those bands that I would say this album in particular, every single performance on every instrument is like a virtuoso performance. It's like basically on cocaine. The whole thing is so fast. And so, it's kind of like an Italian sports car of an album. It certainly is beautiful and has great melodies. It's pretty to look at. The artwork's cool, all that. But man, does it go fast. Mm-hmm. So that's a great record. I know that band is a bit polarizing, but that's my favorite record of theirs. Especially just for the time in my life that it popped up.
Yeah, you got me into them as well. Like that was one that you said, hey, you got to check these guys out and see.
Yeah.
I think you would like them. And we had started sharing our love of kind of, I hate to call them metal because I don't think they're real. I think they're have metal tendencies, but they're all over the place for me. Like
absolutely.
when I first listened to them, I know I told you, I was like, oh, this sounds like Mike Patton, you know, like Faith No More meets Bad Religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
ironic
really,
now because
I dug
Brooks
both of those.
Wackerman is in the band.
Yeah, is the band. Yeah. But I dug both of those bands. So I'm like, well, I'm sure I'm going to probably like this. And I love the artwork and stuff that they do as well. It's really cool.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you can see it or not. This image behind me in this gold frame, that was artwork by Cam Rackham, who's the artist who's done pretty much all of their album covers. So it's cool to own one of his other originals aside from just his band artwork. But I believe he's from Southern California as well.
You just reminded me that for people that aren't watching this is a cool picture of a skull behind Justin's head, which is really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very cool piece of art. Yeah.
Just cool for me to be able to own. So I promise no particular order and a weird assortment of things. So I'll deliver.
Shift. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going from one side of the spectrum to the other. So this is John Mayer, Where the Light Is.
Hell yes.
I'm really open with my love for John Mayer. At times that opens me up for ridicule, but I think people who ridicule John Mayer fans just they're missing out. Yeah. You know, I only feel bad for them. So I didn't get into John Mayer super early. And, you know, my thought was, well, he's like a, you know, what did they call that? Adult contemporary. Is that what they called that genre at the time? Yeah. It's like adult contemporary music.
We're talking like Body's a Wonderland kind of.
Yeah. And Daughters and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was into things like that last record, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember the thing that really got me into him was when this Where the Light Is record came out. It is a live album if you haven't checked it out before, and he basically does 3 sets. So he like opens for himself basically. So he comes out and he does a solo set with just him and a guitar, like an acoustic set. And then he comes out with the John Mayer Trio, which is a blues band, and they do blues songs really, really well. And then he comes out and ends the show with his full band doing his pop tunes and all of that. And so it really shows the full breadth of what he has to offer, at least at the time. And so when that came out, there's a cover of Tom Petty, Free Fallin', on that album. And that blew up on the radio, at least where I lived near Fresno at the time. And so I'm hearing it. I'm going, man, like all my friends couldn't stop listening to it. Like every time I got in one of my friend's car, like that song was on. Yeah. And it was so beautiful. And so it attracted me to it. I checked it out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing because people had been telling me that he was a really great guitar player. And at the time I'm snooty enough that I'm like, yeah, if there's not a world-class guitar player in the band, just not interested. You know, I wanted to hear the coolest shit I could possibly hear. Yep. Well, that changed my mind and really got me into blues and a lot of other styles of music that I was really closed off to before. So he was a gateway to a whole different dimension of my interest in music. It's
funny that you mentioned him, and I won't go on a tangent with John Mayer because again, but the funny piece of that for those of you who are not, or maybe only know of him from the studio cuts that you may hear on the radio and the people who polarize him. My introduction to him was, funny enough, through Dave Chappelle and watching the Chappelle Show.
Oh, yeah.
And him playing on the little, you know. Yeah. And I was like, who is this dude?
Yeah.
You know. And then I was like, I got to look this up. And then I heard a couple songs. I'm like, oh, that's good. You know, it wasn't anything that blew me away. And I can't remember if it was you or someone else. Or like, maybe it was Greg.
Or said, Levi even.
That said, hey, check out the Red Rocks show of him doing Voodoo Child.
Yeah.
And I saw that and I was like, what the fuck?
How?
This guy is insanely talented.
Yeah.
I'm like, A, you're ripping a Jimi Hendrix song. but also doing an incredible good job of that on your own.
Well, he felt like an in-between version of
Stevie Ray,
doing that song and Jimmy doing that song, and just on fire. Oh my God. Yeah, that is a great performance.
Yeah. So that did it for me. That cemented it. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. If you want to know if he's the real deal, check that out.
Just check out that video on YouTube and you're like, okay, all right, I got it.
Yeah. You still might not like his music, but you can't hate on the guy.
No, not
he's
as a
got
player.
The juice.
He's got the goods for sure.
Well, that brings me to number 3. That's this one here, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Tom Petty was an artist that...
Never heard of him.
Did you say Tom Sweaty or Tom
R.I.P. brother.
Tom Petty?
Love everything about you, Tom.
Yeah,
I miss you every day.
So Tom is my favorite songwriter of all time now. I'll admit that for a long time, growing up, I knew some of his songs, and then it took me till like my mid-20s to really get him. I'll admit, and I have a lot of artists like this. We have a whole episode we're planning talking about this kind of thing, but it's like artists you just didn't get right away for whatever reason, or artists that you grew to love. There was something about Tom's voice that I was like, well, this guy's not a great singer. Fucking idiot. But that's what I thought at first. Like for whatever reason, I didn't get his voice.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I expected. But eventually it clicked for me. And so this is Damn the Torpedoes. If this album only had Refugee on it, it would still be in this stack of favorite records.
Yeah.
But there's so many great songs on here. This is another one, kind of like the ones you chose. It's like a greatest hits album.
Yeah.
Just brilliant songwriting, great production. It's these guys in a room to tape, and goddamn, is it just awesome. So
the amazing Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah.
In his heyday. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those of you who are familiar with producers, that guy had the goods for sure.
Well, and this one was recorded at Sound City Studios. So a plug for a great documentary, Sound City. If you haven't seen it, it's been out a long time now, so probably a lot of you have, but would totally recommend checking out Sound City. It will inspire you. And there's so many great artists who recorded classic albums at that studio. So that's a cool one to check out.
Oh man. The Heartbreakers as well, just as a backup. I say as a backup, that's kind of insulting to even say, because everyone in that band with Tom, of course, Tom gets credit for a lot of writing the songs, but the band themselves, they did a lot together.
Oh yeah.
And
well, even Tom's solo stuff is still the Heartbreakers playing on it.
That's I should have brought it, but then I'm like, I'm bringing the whole box set of Tom. But I love that you pulled him out and gave a lot of love there, because we both have massive love for him.
Oh, and check out the Running Down a Dream documentary.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Dude, that documentary, that's another one that is so great. And if Tom's music on its own doesn't get you, if you watch that and you see what kind of guy Tom was, I can't even, because it'd take me 4 hours to tell the story.
Yeah.
But man, what a great story, just all around.
Well, I'll go with another round here. This might cause some controversy with the record that I chose, and again, make no mistake, I own all of those DLR era albums, but the one that I'm going to talk about that I really connected with the most is Van Halen and Fair Warning. I think I'm going to go out, if my wife and I were on the dating game and someone asked us what's our favorite Van Halen album, I think we're both going to say Fair Warning. It's interesting.
Lisa too, huh?
Yeah, because Mean Street, I think we both love. This is one to me where, look, we could have a whole episode, and we probably will, talking about Edward and the genius that is this band.
Yeah.
In all of their incarnations. I do not hate on any of them anymore. I love them all. With Hagar, with the singer from Extreme. I can't think of his name right now. Sorry. But I loved it all. I did, because at the core of it was this absolute genius and his brother, who also is an incredible drummer. But this album just did it for me. Like everything on there, I don't know what about it. Maybe the detuning in like Unchained, that was so, just hearing that riff every time, hearing this crazy tapping thing in the beginning of Mean Street that again is just like, what?
But that song is so badass.
What on earth is happening? Push Comes to Shove. That's another one. Just the tail end of that song, hearing that's in the solo that he does. It's like jazz. It's crazy. This record had a lot to offer, and still, to me, holds up. In my opinion, and only in my opinion, I think it's probably one of the better ones of their early ones. And I love 1 and 2.
Yeah,
I love 1984.
One's in my stack.
I love Women and Children First. But this one really did it for me, and I still go back to it. This is actually in pretty darn good shape, honestly. And I think this is one of an original one. Oh yeah. Look at these lovely mugs.
Yeah. Dude, I love the artwork.
I'm showing a picture of them for those who are watching this, but if you get a chance to check this out, you get to see the beautiful David Lee Roth.
I have to say, and this is no disrespect to David now, but have you ever seen a more beautiful man than David Lee Roth, circa 1979?
Yeah, he's just got that good hair.
Man,
it's crazy.
Just his swag and everything, man. He is that era to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can't, and all of their albums to me at that point. But to go, to shift again from one style of music to another, this just to show, again, kind of going from Avenged to John Mayer. I was also emo before emo was emo, as any young kid would be. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I absolutely have a massive love and adoration for Robert Smith and The Cure. Disintegration is a masterpiece, top to bottom. One that arguably feels also like a concept album to me. I did not own this record immediately, so I'd be a liar if I told you I had it initially. I had it on cassette and then blew it out. I just wore it out.
Yeah.
Every single song on this album to me is special. This also was one that, like another one that I'll share here in just a second, it made keyboards really sexy and cool again for me. And there was some, even though this is guitar heavy and The Cure have a lot of different styles of music, that's one that, will change from one to another. I prefer their gothier type stuff more than their pop, but their poppier songs, I guess, if you will, for whatever definition that is, are still amazing. But this one just really hit home for me, and it's still one that I go back and listen to. It has some incredibly beautiful poetry on it that he wrote. All of these songs, I don't know. It's a very near and dear to me in a personal way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a lot of cool songs that are on it. But I think for hearing keyboards, there's some things on this album when you hear some of the synths and stuff that are in here that are beautiful, that I still to this day kind of try and chase when I'm looking for a sound for us. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I can get that sound that they did on one of these songs on here. Would definitely be that. And let me sort through here and find the other. Oh yeah. So right at the, I guess, this is probably 88, 89. I was finishing high school. I had gotten out of, okay. So I hadn't caught up to this record when it first came out. I was in my first year of college, and I was in that point where I told you before, when I was sharing before, I just had fallen out of love with keyboard, and I just couldn't find it. I was like, man, I want to play in music, but maybe I need to find a different instrument that will resonate, because I just wasn't feeling like people would gravitate towards it. And a really good friend of mine who was kind of into some indie music at the time when I met him at college, and he gave me a tape. And on that tape, it had Jane's Addiction's Nothing Shocking on one side, and then on the other side was this album called Pretty Hate Machine by a band called Nine Inch Nails. And I was so intrigued by that name, as anyone I would imagine would be. You're like, what is Nine Inch Nails going to be? And I listened to that tape, and my life had been forever changed. That was one that I cannot express just how much of a change that brought about. But it brought me back in full swing to my love of writing music with my main instrument, which was a synth or piano. And it expressed all the angst and all the things that I was feeling in a way that people talk about when they heard Smells Like Teen Spirit. It kind of awoke in something for them. Hearing like Terrible Lie or Head Like a Hole, that was the same sort of primal thing that it brought out in me, and it still does. And I had owned a copy of this album, and I think a girlfriend burned it when we broke up. I don't know. Damn her. If that were the case, I honestly can't remember. But I went back and just recently got a new copy of this from their website. And have also just been blistering this one.
They do great pressings of their new stuff.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, let's see. What else do I have here? I'll try to move fairly quickly on these next few. Doesn't mean I love them any less. Ryan Adams' Prisoner. So this is in so many ways a perfect album. I love every song on here. Mm-hmm. Ryan is such a great songwriter, and I didn't get into him early in his career at all. I caught him maybe midway, 2/3 of the way to up to date. So, this album came out, like 2014, maybe? Is that right?
I honestly can't remember.
No, maybe a little later.
Because the eponymous album, I think, that we heard.
Oh, that was probably around then. Yeah.
This came after that.
Yeah, so that's when I got into him, was his self-titled, and I really loved that album. It was great.
Yeah.
But this one just took what I loved about that self-titled and then took it even further. Man, this is so great. If you like rock and roll that still feels rootsy in a way, it's kind of... It's not particularly brash, as in hard to listen to, but it feels rough around the edges and it feels real. And the songwriting's great, and it's not everything is auto-tuned and aligned. It's like a good modern version of older types of music. But really cool. And his lyrics really do it for me too. There's so much about what he has to say that just resonates with me. So this is Ryan at his more rock and roll. Earlier on, he was more country. He's been more folk. He's been more a lot of different kinds of things. He's evolved a lot throughout his career. All of his stuff is great, but this is my favorite. Yeah.
Hearing him do, I think he's done so many, like Rainbow in the Dark by Dio, and South of Heaven, Slayer. Like hearing him do acoustic versions of songs that he loves. Yeah, you could just listen to that and be pretty blown away.
Yeah, you wonder how the guy who wrote When the Stars Go Blue,
right,
is inspired by Slayer. Slayer, but it works.
Yeah, that works for sure.
So this band is called the 1975. They are from the UK, and man, this is such a cool album. This, I'm always searching for this feeling. It almost feels like a drug-induced feeling of like when you find something that feels really fresh to your ears and totally captures your imagination. The more music that I listen to and the older that I get, it's harder to get that feeling. Because you've heard so many things, and then you're hearing iterations on ideas that you've heard before, which doesn't make it not cool, but it doesn't necessarily just like, I don't know, teleport you somewhere is that's the metaphor that I use. But this album did that for me. I think this came out in 2013 and somewhere around there. And I remember hearing Chocolate on the radio, which really surprised me because I didn't listen to the radio much even then, but I would tune in every once in a while out of curiosity for like, all right, what's in top 40 right now? And I'm glad I did at that time, because that song came on, and even though it made total sense, it didn't make any sense compared to what it was being played next to.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, I can't, admittedly, I couldn't understand a word he was saying other than chocolate.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of a running joke with the band, with his accent and the way that they make their music. People misinterpret the lyrics, I think, sometimes. But a brilliant album that's really poppy, but in a cool way, like done as a band and combining elements of pop music and indie music and different things and putting them together in a way that felt, to me at the time, really, really fresh. And so that's a cool one. It's an album that triggers a feeling of nostalgia from like a time period I never lived in for some reason. You know, it's like,
Right.
like this other life that I maybe led, at some point, feels triggered in nostalgia by this album. Ride the Lightning, Metallica. Metallica had to make it in here. I love most of their albums. I'm not a Saint Anger lover, but that's okay. I won't shit on it.
No.
Ride the Lightning. So, quick funny story of how I got into this album. I'm in high school. I'm a freshman. I'm a freshman in high school, and a friend of a friend who goes to the, what do they call the school that, like, when you get kicked out of school and they send you to the bad kid school? What's that called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Like, if you don't get to go to the main high school, they send you to it's like an alternate campus that's meant just for the bad kids, basically.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's like detention all day school.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
It's the one that you go to before they just like kick you out of high school.
Yeah, before you're done.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is a one more chance school.
Yeah. Purgatory school. There was a name for it. I don't remember. Yeah. Anyway, there was this kid who went to the school right next door to us. That was the bad kid school that I almost ended up going to before I got kicked out anyway, or my dad pulled me out of that school. And he, to this day, I don't know his real name. I only know him by Cricket. And he was this like punk rock, he was way taller than everyone else, skinny. He was just a character, like, in every sense of the word. This guy both scared the hell out of me and was so cool to me at the same time. And, he was just like really authentically himself. Mm-hmm. And he was, he was in bad shit. So, he was in trouble. But anyway, he gives me this CD that he burned that had the weirdest combination of songs on it. And I didn't know any of it. And I was just excited to check it out. Right. It's got Mama, I'm Coming Home, Ozzy. It's got Santeria.
From Sublime.
Sublime.
Nice.
It's got Fight Fire with Fire and Fade to Black. It's got all kinds of random shit on it. And so I remember being in my my history class, learning no history, with my headphones on in the back of class, just playing Fade to Black over and over again, like I had never heard music before.
Wow.
It was like the first time we talk about that teleported feeling.
Yeah.
Fade to Black was, the closest thing to doing drugs that I could possibly imagine at 14 years old. I'm just going, my God, how can they make something like this? Yeah. This one's a fave of mine. Awesome album.
That's a fantastic record. And again, a lot of love for those guys to just keep doing it. Like they just keep doing it, keep figuring it out. And some are hits. To me, we have a whole great podcast planned about our another band that we love, of course, Megadeth. Sort of a fun versus, of
showdown.
Yeah, a showdown of the Black Album versus Rust in Peace, which again, we'll have a fun debate about that, but no hate whatsoever to Metallica and who they are and what they've represented to music, especially in that genre forever. And this is another one that when you finally get to see the album and you see that album artwork, right? It's just so creepy and
dude,
evil.
I need this tattooed on me at some point. I've seen some good versions of it and I've seen some bad versions, but they I think the story is this idea came from Stephen King. They read this in a Stephen King novel. I can't remember which one. That idea of Ride the Lightning with the electric chair. So
I wonder if that was a Green Mile. I wonder if that was I don't know. That might have been later.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. He had a lot of things talking about like jail and penitentiary or something.
Yeah.
I remember living a lot of that. All right. So I think I want to cover this one first because I think this is a good one. I think is very important. Again, a lot of my love again come from the art, but also this was another one that blew me away and also reminded me that keyboards can still be cool, even in a rock band, even during this time when I was struggling to believe that you could have a rock band and still have a keyboard in it, you know. So Journey Frontiers, another remarkable album from a remarkable band.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult touching them at this point in their career. It was just kind of mind blowing. And I'm looking at the records here and it's like, you know, Separate Ways. The first time I heard that, and I did it in a talent show. I was just talking to my mom about this before, a few days ago, actually. And I wanted to learn it. So I was like, okay, well, I got to learn the whole beginning of that song, which is so cool. And being able to play that song was kind of like the first thing that I remember as a cover song that we fully learned together. And when it finally started shaping up, and I was like, oh my God, this kind of sounds like Journey. I mean,
isn't that a trip when you do that for like
our
some
singer
of the first
did
times?
not sound like Steve Perry. I'll just be super honest and no hate, but again, you know, we're not pulling that off. But certainly the keyboardist and guitarist, we held up. We did pretty well. Greg ripped it. Yeah.
Well, that's still admirable. I mean, Neil Sean is no slouch.
Yeah, that's the only thing. And I'll say this, and I hate to say this too, but I got the chance to meet him, and he was not a kind dude.
Oh, that blows.
It was really sucky because I had so much adoration for him as a player, even though I can't play guitar, not anything even close to that. And getting a chance to meet him. He was in a band called Bad English at the time. This is after Journey kind of split and Steve Perry had done his own thing. I won't digress, but that's always that thing. Never meet your idols, you know. It kind of lived up to that. It was a bummer, but maybe he's changed. Who knows? Maybe
he was having a bad day. Who knows?
It doesn't sound like it from all the stuff they talk about them fighting and infighting now with the band, even at this era. But nevertheless, this album was super influential to me, and I really love it. Also, a record that's in good shape and one that has some super dope artwork on it.
Yeah.
This one might be a little rare for some, but there is a period in my life. In the late 90s that I became absolutely obsessed with electronic music.
Yeah, that's a big genre for you.
It's a huge genre for me. And it kind of shows up in certain pieces of music like The Cure and Nine Inch Nails and stuff. But this one, I was living in Orlando, Florida. I'd moved back there from Ohio from going to school there. I was in Orlando. And dance music, like club music, house music, all that kind of stuff was very big. Mm-hmm. And that was a point in my life where I would say from probably 96 to maybe 2002, I did not listen to the radio whatsoever. Everything in my entire music was being informed by going to clubs and by being in that sort of club and electronic music scene. And again, I wasn't playing music at this point, but I was obsessed with DJing and learning how to actually curate and DJ a set list and mixing songs and having them be in sync by BPM, but also by the key that they were in. I heard all these great DJs that were really good, like European DJs like Sasha and Don Digweed, and a lot of great Danny Tenaglia from New York. There was just a phenomenal scene at this period of my life. One of my most favorite or well revered. Yeah. Anyway, I remember seeing a movie that I loved around this time called Trainspotting, a Danny Boyle film that is remarkable for anyone who hasn't had a chance to see this. Incredible movie. A movie about drugs, but also a movie about growing up. And it had this song in it that was from an electronic band called Underworld. And I just remember going, what on earth is this? And I heard it in a club, before hearing it in this, movie. And it evoked the same kind of like, hair on your arm standing up. And I had to know more. It was like one of those things where I'm like, I have to go find this record right now. I need to go find it. It was like I was obsessed with figuring out who made this, right? And I found this album called Second Toughest in the Infants. And it became a long, long love of this band. They are, as I consider them to be, one of the best and most influential electronica or electronic music artists in the world. They've done music for the London Olympics. They've done a ton of music for film, but also had a very successful career in this type of music. And it represents a very important period in my life, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, at another time, but a very cool, very, very cool album to check out. Wow. It's hard to beat this one as well. I have a lot to say about the Joshua Tree. I could talk about this record for a long time. There is not a bad song on this album, period.
Yeah.
It's arguably one of the best, to me, albums of all time. I would put it up there in, certainly in a top 100. If anyone asked, it would be up there very high on the list for me. From the production of this, people have studied this record and tried to make their entire career or their style of music based just on this album, to me. But hearing this for the very first time, and it was also hearing them talk about it, coming to America, immersing themselves in America, and going to the desert like many people do when they want to find themselves or find their next thing.
I still want to do that.
Yeah. And you have the amazing Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois producing this. I mean, how do you not come up with something that's a home run automatically?
Home run.
You to not feel something on this, you don't have feelings. If you can't put this album on, even now, as much as U2's been out there in the universe, right?
Yeah, another band that's easy to dismiss because of their immense success. You're like, okay, yeah. Don't sleep on U2.
And this one on vinyl, but this is very special. Very special album, an incredibly great repressing of this, beautiful artwork, of course. Just a phenomenal album, top to bottom. One that you must have, I think. Yeah. Especially in that format.
Yeah.
It's just really, really great.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that every single album sounds so much better on vinyl, but it does seem that there are certain records that come to life in this format, I have to admit. That's great that's one of them.
Yeah.
All right, well, I keep saying I'm going to go faster and I don't, but we're going to see what happens. I'm going to try. So this came out in high school for me. You always joke about me being an emo kid, and admittedly,
what a cool
in my heart,
artwork.
I probably am. I never really got into most emo bands, though, is the funny thing. Like I was into, at the time we called it metalcore, but I guess I always had a little soft spot in my heart for some of this. This band is great. It's easy sometimes, I think, if you don't get it right away, to make fun of bands who wear makeup and wear their heart on their sleeve and all that. But I think that that's a mistake to jump to that conclusion too quickly. This album is another one that I consider a masterpiece. And I mean that comprehensively. Like, they did cool stuff before this. They did great stuff after this. It's like emo Queen, people talk about Queen a lot when they talk about this album.
It's a concept album too, isn't it?
Yeah, I would assume they would call it a concept album. Yeah. I mean, it follows a lyrical theme. There's so much cool stuff on here. Like, I don't even know where to start. Pretty much everyone's heard the Black Parade to the point where, it's almost a meme. But the rest of the album is just a great journey it takes you on with lots of twists and turns, great musicianship. It was produced by Rob Cavallo, I believe, if I'm remembering that right. Mixed by Chris Lord-Alge, one of my favorite mixers.
Yep.
Just sonically, it's amazing too. So this is a really, really fun listen. It's got heavy moments. It's got tender moments. It's got For the Rafters. Listening to the vocal performances on this album are just so fun. Anyone who knows this band, loves Gerard Way, and he's done some really cool stuff with comics as well. But the way that he is just it's reckless abandon and all emotion, like every pore of his body seems to be oozing,
emoting.
Emoting. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Whatever it is he's singing in the moment. And so, this always challenges me because, that's a hard place to get into, but there's it doesn't appear a self-conscious bone in his body. He really gives it everything he's got. We already talked Van Halen, so I won't labor too long. I picked Van Halen 1, so fuck you.
No, fuck you.
I mean, the first 4 and beyond are all incredible. For me, I always heard people talk about this, and usually I like bands a little bit better once they've refined their thing for a while. And so it's almost odd for me to choose the first album. And at the time that I'm coming up, like I'm having to go back in time to find Van Halen.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that they did so well, other bands had been ripping off and repurposing for years. So I kind of felt like I knew the band, even though I didn't really at the time. And, but going back, this one just captures me every time. And I think what is so cool about this band, one of the million things that's so cool about them, is that most of their songs are in a major kind of tonality. And especially at the time when I thought about rock and roll and heavy metal or whatever, I'm thinking minor keys. I'm thinking, dark and brooding and angry. You can't listen to this and not have the biggest smile on your face. I mean, you even look back at videos of Eddie playing, and he just looks like it's the greatest day of his life the entire time on stage. That's how I feel when I listen to this. It just fills me with joy. But while major songs can sometimes come across to me a little cheesy sometimes or a little too happy, the swag and the attitude that they did everything with totally made it so cool. So it was both fun and badass at the same time. And I can't think of another band that had that combination that was that great. I mean, there are other bands, sure, but I don't know, something about it and their whole vibe. But yeah, this one to kick it off.
Yeah, that you think about how much, you read all their lore about everything and how much they had played and refined their skill and have been playing at any place and every place, sometimes two shows a day in totally different places in LA,
weddings and
whatever.
Yeah.
And just doing it. And by the time this record comes out, it's just sort of flawless execution top to bottom of that thing. They
Absolutely.
were a party band, but you have just this incredible musicianship there. That's another one like Detroit Rock City, where in the beginning of Running with the Devil, you hear sort of the sort of city and all the kind of, all this stuff going on. Yep. Yeah. And then exactly. And then the bass, Michael Anthony's boom, boom, boom,
it's so iconic.
Yeah. You can't.
Yeah. You can't beat it. I would recommend if anyone's having a bad day and you're like driving to work, or maybe you're just not feeling very energized, just put that on. Start with Running with the Devil. Your day will take a different turn. I promise you. So this brings me to my favorite singer of all time, Chris Cornell in Soundgarden. I love all of Chris's work, all of it, even the stuff other people, seem to not love, like his Scream album. I thought was amazing too. But what do I know? This is Super Unknown, and God, I can't say enough great things about this album. And a lot of their albums, pretty much all of them. This band is so great. And one of the things that's interesting to me looking back on the grunge era, people seem to talk about grunge like grunge even means anything. Yeah. You know, grunge, I guess, was maybe more of a movement than it was a genre. Like, I feel like the genre of grunge doesn't mean anything because all of the grunge bands sound totally different. Like, if you're someone who's like, okay, yeah, I've heard Nevermind, I know Nirvana, I get grunge, or maybe, you know, you're into Pearl Jam or you're into any one of those particular bands from that era, and you think you get it, you don't, I promise you. Go check out the other bands. This is my favorite flavor of grunge right here. This album is incredible. It's produced so well. It sounds incredible. The performances, I mean, especially vocally, but the whole band. The song Super Unknown, the only way I know how to say it, that song in particular, it makes me feel like when I listen to it that I'm being like pulled through a black hole by my like little toe or something.
A black hole sun?
Not a black hole sun, although that is on this album. But I don't know. It just makes me feel like I'm getting have you ever been on Space Mountain at Disneyland?
I've heard of it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, I'm sure you have at some point.
No,
so at the beginning of that ride, they do this thing where you're going up in your little car and there's lights that are spinning around, but every other light is spinning the other direction. So as you're going up, you start to lose orientation. You feel like you're like almost rotating. Yeah, I feel like I'm being like pulled through something like that through the fabric of the universe.
You're in the upside down.
Yeah. It's like the trippiest feeling. So I love that album for that. I'll do one more, and I know we've got a couple.
No, please.
So this was huge for me as well. I mean, I guess I don't need to say that. All of these were. That's why I chose them. But this band is called Alter Bridge. This is their third record, AB3. I don't know how this band doesn't get so much more attention. I really don't. I don't know what else to say. I mean, most of the band was Creed.
Yeah. So we can go there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's a, and I'll say this because you got me turned on to this.
Yeah.
But I hated Creed. And this is also a point, and I'll still say that. I'm sorry for anyone out there. Sorry, guys. So sorry.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that was also in a period where I just wasn't listening. I told you I wasn't listening to music on the radio at that point. I've become very disenchanted with that after the grunge era, I think, and what I felt to be A&R's attempt at trying to chase the grunge era. I became very turned off.
Manufacture something that was,
and you could go in that period of those sort of late 90s where I felt like every artist that was coming out, and even into the early 2000s, I was like, oh Jesus, give me a fucking break. This is sounds like something that I was very passionate about. So I largely dismissed Creed for that very reason. I'm like, okay, this is somebody's trying to chase Pearl Jam in this, and that's how I felt. So, but you turn me on to this and go, well, it's the same band, but it's with this other guy, Miles Kennedy.
It's the same band, but it is not the same band.
No. And it is not fair to even classify it that way. Yeah. I think hearing them and hearing this record in particular, I actually love this record.
Oh, it's so good.
So happy that you pulled it out because it's a phenomenal album, an incredible singer.
Yeah.
Also a great songwriter. And he's, one of several, I'd imagine, in the band. Amazing music.
The main writers are Mark Tremonti, the guitar player, and Miles Kennedy. You already said so many great things about it, so I'll just say there's so much. To me, this is my favorite album by them, not because it's like, objectively the best or even subjectively the best. What gets me about this album is Miles' lyrics. It really feels like he was just putting a lot out there for the world and processing a lot of things about who he is or his life in a way that just felt so raw. And this album, I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it, will bring me to tears on a regular basis. I mean, most of it's heavy and you wouldn't think on the surface that it's a deeply emotional album. But man, like Ghosts of Days Gone By, that song will just break me sometimes.
The best ones do.
Oh man. Yeah. And there's a couple others that are more on the beautiful side. Life Must Go On toward the end. Wonderful Life. I mean, these are songs that if you let what's being said kind of sink in, it's hard not to be moved. But then, next to all that stuff is awesome, huge riffs, soaring vocals. I mean, Miles is so great. And I think a lot of people know that now amongst all his different projects he's done. A lot of people know who he is at this point, and rightly so. The other thing I really love about this, and actually some of these other albums that I've gone through, is that heavier music today seems to, so much of it sounds the same in terms of production. I know people will argue in terms of songwriting too or whatever, but in terms of production, I think a lot of that is the laptop recording. Like everyone has access to the tools, and the tools have gotten really great. A handful of those tools are kind of ubiquitous and everyone uses them. Therefore, look, this is me talking out of my ass, but it's my take on it. So a lot of things end up sounding kind of the same. This album is heavy and full of riffs, but it doesn't sound like anyone else's record. It sounds only like them. And I think that's something that is inspiring me as we progress through our journey of making music, of like, how do we find a sound that takes advantage of what's great about technology and being able to do it yourself, but allows us to find our own sonic fingerprint, I suppose, to where we don't sound like everything else that's out there, for better or for worse. I want to have our thing,
Yeah.
And I think they really found that on this album.
Yeah. Super, super good. Yeah, I take back everything I said about them. After hearing that, I'm like, well, these are the same guys. It's just a different singer.
Yeah.
And I didn't resonate with
and cut
Creed.
loose a little more. You realize like, man, they must have been writing really safe in Creed.
Yeah.
And maybe not. Maybe that was just what they were trying to do at the time.
I honestly felt
I don't know, but
I feel like that was a producer. Maybe, and I could be completely wrong, but it's like
Tremonti is like a thoroughbred
racehorse,
horse, just ready to churn out the coolest riffs and like most awesome stuff. Like his solo project is great too, and I could go on for a while. Oh yeah,
riff machine.
Yeah, very inspirational guy.
Well, I could talk about another guy who's a riff machine.
Bring it,
because I would love for anyone to dispute the riff machine that is Keith Richards. Keith Richards.
Uncle Keith.
Well, this album has this is such an amazing
for anyone
record.
Who's not watching, the visual on this album is amazing. You got to explain it.
Look, so Sticky Fingers, without a doubt. I mean, Rolling Stones come on, just find a bad record. I'm sure they're out there, but I don't know of any. It's kind of like Tom Petty. I mean, they honed their craft and they've done it really well, and they did it and have still doing it.
When you got it, you got it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And Keith and Mick, oh my goodness gracious. Boy, they just did it. But there's a particular era of Rolling Stones that I love, and it was kind of in this sort of, when they sort of found the blues, and probably when they started doing more drugs, but they certainly got a thing going on in the 70s, and Sticky Fingers was definitely one of those records. But I didn't come across this record by knowing all the music on it at first. I came across this record because it was like, what on earth? And when I first saw this, it's like, it was very gimmicky to see that there's and for any of you who've never seen this album, there's a guy's pants, and there's a zipper on it.
Let's be specific. Yeah. It's a close-up shot of a crotch.
It's a close-up shot of a crotch.
It's from
with a
belt line
zipper
down to, let's say mid-thigh.
Mid-thigh, yeah. And there's a zipper on it. But what was so interesting about this, they wanted to get even further, so they built an actual zipper in the record. So
that's hilarious. I want to know whose coked out idea that was. That's
you can hear the zipper. It still works. Like, it's pretty crazy. So
what's the back of the the back artwork.
Well, of course, is the ass.
Yeah. So, of course it's got to, if you got the crotch, the backside, it's got to be the ass.
You got to be the ass on the backside.
Yeah.
But man, what a phenomenal album, top to bottom. Again, I listened to Rolling Stones and knew about, songs on classic rock stations and all that kind of stuff. But that one did it for me. And I still very much go back and listen to these quite often. That's another one that's like, if you need something to put you in a good mood, a Rolling Stones album can usually.
What's your favorite song on there?
Oh man, let's see.
At least you can pick your favorite song today, subject to change.
Yeah, bitch.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The dun 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 dun. Like you just, oh my God, you just want to get up and start dancing like Mick.
Yeah.
That one's great. Brown Sugar is also very good too.
That'd be my fave.
That's a super good. But Can You Hear Me Knocking? Probably one of the dopest, badass guitar riffs ever. And that song goes on in such a journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, but those are definitely up there. My tippy top for them for sure. I'll go one more.
Yeah, bring us home.
Well, I jokingly said this earlier before we started this podcast that I don't feel that if you're going to have a vinyl collection, that you should have this in your collection, unapologetic. You should absolutely own this record.
Yeah, you're subject to that opinion.
I absolutely, and I'm sure many of these albums are going to create a lot of controversy or a lot of debate about. Like,
I can't wait for people to shit on us.
In the hell are these guys on? But I am certainly not apologizing about this. I absolutely adore the Bee Gees, and this album of Saturday Night Fever is incredible. Top to bottom, again, another smash. They don't do all the songs on there, of course, because it's an album that was done for the movie with John Travolta. And there's a lot of other songs on here too. But I mean, if you know the Bee Gees, you're going to know Staying Alive, More Than a Woman, Night Fever, How Deep Is Your Love. I mean, just those songs right there. That's the greatest hits for them, right? And it comes at a time when disco was sort of at its high point. And, again, this one, there's another great documentary on the Bee Gees that kind of talk about the rise and fall of what happened to them around this and how it blew up like a rocket ship. And then everyone, started burning their disco albums and all this kind of stuff. And they became sort of a thing of parody, which it blows my mind societally that's where things get that way, but they do.
Well, if something gets too big, it runs the risk of imploding. Yeah.
And people it really did. Like they were going out to baseball fields and creating this big pyre of albums, of disco albums, and everyone's throwing their disco records on there and this whole big thing. And I'm like, man, why? Like if you just go down and listen to the music it's incredible. Yeah. And no doubt they're great songwriters. This was in the height of their craft, but they were not disco people before. So learning about them and appreciating them, plus seeing their lovely picture in all of their glory, their outfits and the big gold chain and the beards and the whole thing, and Barry Gibb, and pretty awesome. Yeah, pretty awesome record. I have to own it. I definitely enjoy it. It's an album that I will go back to and listen to on occasion. But some super great songs on there. Not just by them, but by some other artists as well.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I got two more.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, both of them are metal. Awesome.
I had no idea what was left. We go from Bee Gees to Mastodon.
Yeah. I love that. Fuck yeah. Mastodon. Man, this is my favorite artwork of theirs too, by the way. So this is Crack the Sky. I think this came out in 2008. At this time for me, the albums they had put out prior to this, I was aware of them through magazines and, just being plugged into what was happening in metal. People had great things to say about them. I remember listening to a couple of songs here and there and feeling like it was a little raw for me. I wasn't quite ready for it. I was admittedly into the slightly more produced or what I perceived as like technical metal at that time. But this one was my entry point to this band, and I love them now. I love all of their records. This one was also cool because I think I'm right about this, but this was the one that really got their drummer into vocals as well. Basically, everyone in that band has a great voice. So what a luxury. Yes. And it gives them a dimension that is so fun to listen to because they're really experimental and interesting with their music. And then having all the different voices and figuring out who sings when, it keeps you so interested in what they're doing, and they all could front the band on their own.
Yeah.
But the fact that they can share duties with apparently no ego and get that done, I mean, it's so fun to listen to. And this one, especially once I started looking into it a little more, man, the lyrics and where the band was when they made this is such a heartbreaking but also inspirational story. I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the band here, but they were going through some really hard stuff. And I know they have some documentary videos on YouTube and probably elsewhere that where they go into this. But there was a tragic loss due to suicide from one of the band members' family. And, he kind of talks about how he hadn't really processed it still. And the band gave him kind of the forum to sort of express some of these ideas through a story. And so it's both a concept album that has to do with, Tsarist era Russia and astral projection and all these crazy, like really larger than life, fun sort of ideas. But it's also a bit metaphorical for the emotional process that they were going through and trying to, suppose getting over is not the right word, but like come to terms with and find some level of peace or acceptance with, that tragic loss. So the double-sided nature of the interpretation of the lyrics and the really exciting, songwriting, like if you've heard of Mastodon and you're thinking you want to check them out, but you don't really know them, I'd say start here. This is great.
That's a Brendan O'Brien special, isn't it?
Yeah. Brendan O'Brien.
We're going to have an episode just on Brendan O'Brien.
I'd love to.
We have a lot of fandom for him as a producer and engineer.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. That's another band that you mentioned that in a world of metal, because we both love them. You definitely have taken on to them a little bit more than I have. But the one thing I would think that's really cool, two things, another funny, Jeff Ament, the bass player from Pearl Jam, introduced me as a listener and a lover of Pearl Jam to Mastodon. So there you go. Good on them. Hey. That's one thing that you'll appreciate, at least about Pearl Jam. Secondly, though, Brendan O'Brien's production, it makes the album not sound like a lot of modern metal to me. And I relate to what you were talking about earlier. Yeah. It has a very open, natural sound to it. The drums particularly sound phenomenal on a lot of Mastodon stuff. Yeah. It's really great.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, it's like what we were talking about with AB3, where they have their own signature sound and production that doesn't make it sound like everything else happening. Man, that's another band that fits there.
Sounds phenomenal on vinyl as well.
Yeah, it does.
Really does.
Oh yeah, it does.
They come to life.
Oh dude, yeah. It's so great.
Yeah.
So my last one, Trivium.
You're rocking the Trivium shirt.
Yeah, I'm in the long sleeve today. That was unplanned, but it works out great. So this is Ascendancy. This came out in 2005. So I find this around the same time that I find City of Evil, the one I started with. And very different bands in terms of what they do. But both so just inspirational for me. This album's fucking crazy. It's really heavy. It's really great. It blew them up, put them on the map. This was their second album. And this band gets a lot of love these days, I feel like, which is great because they're primarily their singer, although I think pretty much all of them do the streaming thing now. Matt Hafey, who's the front man, one of the guitar players, he has a really big online presence, and he was kind of early on into the like Twitch streaming when it was primarily gamers, and he games on there too, I think. But he, thought outside the box and said, okay, well, people are using it for this particular thing, but why don't I use it for what I do? So he'd get on there and just practice and like do his normal routine that he would normally do, but with the camera on, where he could engage with the audience. And, he'll play songs for people. He'll do covers. He'll show people behind the scenes stuff while on tour. He'll play games. He's just, being his regular self, but making himself available to fans. And people seem to really have responded to that. And, man, I'm really happy for him and the band that that's the case, because I think it's opened doors for them, and, hopefully inspired them to continue doing stuff like that in other bands. Cause I mean, thinking that you can click a button and any day be hanging out with one of your favorite artists. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it really tears the wall down between artists. And a lot of artists don't prefer to do that. But that was interesting, kind of getting introduced to them through that sort of thing. And remember seeing him, and he's like, doing vocal warm-ups or whatever. And I'm like, who is watching this? But a lot of people were really engaged. Really engaged with him in that way. It's really interesting to see. Yeah,
he'll show off new gear that he got, and do demonstrations of songs. Someone's like, "Hey, how do you play the part in this song?" And he'll go, "Fuck, oh yeah, here it is. Like you play it like this, And he's got multiple camera angles up so you can see everything he's doing. It's a really great idea, and someone that I dream to have on this podcast one day. I think he'd be an awesome guest.
Oh yeah.
So. Yeah, that's Trivium. You could pick any of their records as far as I'm concerned. I think they're all amazing. That one is special to me based on the time of my life I found it, and it was the gateway for me into their music. But their last couple of records have just smashed. Their newest one, In the Court of the Dragon, is phenomenal. And they're a band that stays reasonably true to who they are. Like there's that core Trivium sound and everything. But they definitely have branched out and did some different things. And I think all of those iterations are so cool. It's kind of like seeing an actor in different movies, in different wardrobe. And you're like, oh, I know that's DiCaprio, but he looks so different in this movie. Or like, that's a really cool role for him. It's kind of like that as a band for them. Like you recognize them, but they also show up differently enough that, it's interesting and cool. I think that's awesome.
We've come to the end of our first vinyl countdown. But we certainly have many more to go. But I think the whole point to bring it back was just that, it was a journey for us to get back in our love of finding a medium that we could really sort of unapologetically listen to in a way that doesn't interrupt you, that doesn't make you want to check out something else while you're trying to do or multitask while you're wanting to listen to music. And as musicians,
really get swept up in it.
And you get to focus solely on the thing. Whether you're looking at the artwork, you're reading the lyrics, you're reading about some of these producers and people that made these incredible albums. And I'm sure that many of you out there, I hope, have a favorite album or two in your collection, or one that you, if you were about to get into vinyl, would go, these are the ones that I got to go get, right?
Yeah.
And we have friends that certainly share. They'll take pictures. Our friend Andy sent me a picture of two that he picked up over the weekend. That he was like, I was so excited to get these, And now with a lot of stores and a lot of people going and pressing again, there's a lot more availability of them out there. So, and again, as you mentioned from the top of this, if there is an artist that you love, and getting into maybe this form of listening to music is something that you're intrigued by, don't take our word or opinion for it. Please go out and do your research on those kind of things. Find the there's a turntable that's an affordability factor for pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go and spend $25,000 on something,
Yeah, look, I mean, the world of vinyl is a huge rabbit hole. And if you get online, there are so many snobs. I'm not into that.
No,
I mean,
nor am I.
look, at the end of the day, who cares what pressing you have? Who cares what turntable you have? None of it matters. What matters is, are you enjoying the art? It's really easy to get caught up in the details. And I'm not saying it's not great to have better stuff, better pressings, better whatever.
Absolutely.
But we're talking about, in general, marginal returns here. And there are so many people who will disagree with this statement, I'm sure. But what matters is the music. Does it connect with you?
Yeah.
And so for that matter, it doesn't matter the format. You know, maybe vinyl speaks to you and that's great. If it doesn't, like, man, if you're a kid growing up now, the nostalgia that was records for me might be CDs for kids coming up now, right? Or like, who knows, right? All the perspective is relative. You know, I would say just get into whatever really excites you. If something seems cool, whether it makes sense or not, it doesn't have to be logical. Like, you know, follow what makes you curious and excited to put something on. And you know, I'm sure for a lot of you it is vinyl, and hopefully you get a kick out of it. But if nothing else, if one of these albums sparked some interest for you that we talked about, listen to it however you can.
Yeah,
you know?
or even better, go and support them.
Yeah,
right. Go to their websites. A lot of times you're going to find their stores on there. Many of them have gone and painstakingly, even if they're an older artist or a newer artist, they've gone and really spent the time to create something special for those who are interested in that world.
It's not cheap to manufacture, so
no,
they do it for people who really love it. You know?
And like you said, it can be a rabbit hole and it can be costly. So save your money, but you know, spend wisely.
Yeah,
you know?
Or buy a T-shirt, or you know, do something for them. You know? Buy them a coffee.
It keeps them going. It keeps all of it going, right?
Yeah.
It's good commerce, but it's also something that you can really find a love for and enjoy in a really healthy way.
Yeah. Yeah. Support great art. Support each other. Well,
hell, support us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can keep making
if you're
great
feeling
art.
generous. Yeah. Yeah. We'd love to be supported. That said, thank you all. If you made it to the end, we appreciate you. If you didn't, I know you're not hearing this, but we appreciate you too.
We do appreciate you.
This has been really fun for us. We plan to do more of these. If you loved it, if you hated it, we'd love to know. If it was too long, if it was too short, we'd love to know that too. Check us out. Stay in contact with us. The sonicalchemy.com or on social media. Our objective here really is to create a place for artists and people who love art to talk about things like this. And we want the community to have a say in where we take this channel. So, this is new for us. You know, we're not trying to position ourselves as someone we're not. We are finding our way with this thing. So, you know, if you got feedback, we want to hear it.
Join the conversation and make noise.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Until next time, thank you so much. We will see you later.